Hey everybody, my name is SPAZ and I'm a CD junkie. I'd like to dedicate this episode of CD Junkie to the late great Peter Tork and Davy Jones because I'm going to focus on the Monkees on this episode of CD Junkie. Now, I'm not really going to focus on Pool It or Justus or not even Good Times. I'm really going to focus on the original output from the 60s to the early 70s. So basically in 66, when the show debuted, my brother and I was 3, he was 4, we were plopped in front of the TV set, and my parents told us that those were the only 30 minutes of the week that they knew that we would not get into trouble. We were transfixed by the colors and the sounds and the zany antics of Peter, Mike, Davy, and Mickey. So, first memories, of course, go all the way back to the debut album, self-titled. Of course, Last Train to Clarksville, theme from the Monkees, Papa Jean's Blues. This here is the deluxe edition, which contains like stereo and mono and a bunch of alternate tracks. But this album, classic. I mean, who is going to deny just the majesty of some of these great songs? And the bonus tracks, some of them are not essential, but most of them are. A lot of great either alternate recordings, unreleased recordings, different mixes, all that stuff. There is a super deluxe version that came out through Rhino, and you can only get it online, but I do not own that. But I do own this. And the Monkees, obviously a great album, should be part of your collection. The next album, released without their consent or knowledge, was more of the Monkees. I have for some reason, much fonder memories of the music on this, but the cover of that. My memories are very strong of this cover. And, of course, them in their JCPenney outfits was definitely tattooed on my brain, but it's the music here. You know, I'm a believer, and this one here is the deluxe edition that has mono and stereo. I mean, She and Mary Mary and just Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow. Stellar album. Again, released without their consent, and that sort of caused a revolt against Don Kirshner and the label. And then they went in the studio themselves and recorded their next album, which is probably tied with my there's probably, I think, more of the Monkees. This album, the next album, and the following album are all tied. I actually do think that they are better than the first album, although I love that first album. That's just like saying you like Abbey Road more than Sgt. Pepper. They're both masterpieces. But anyway, Headquarters was a fantastic album. They played nearly all the instruments on the album. And while there wasn't a hit single on the album, it is stellar. I mean, Shades of Grey with vocals by Davy and Peter will just give you chills now. I mean, it gave me chills back when I was a kid. I remember putting on the headphones and just being entranced by that song and the beauty of it. But, you know, there's a lot of great things on here. Sunny Girlfriend, Forget That Girl, Randy Scouse Git. I mean, that was Mickey Dolenz first songwriting effort on record, and it was out of the park. It was amazing. But Headquarters, fantastic album. The next album, they still had musical control, but they used a lot of outside musicians to help them record the album. That's Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones. Obviously, the cover was inspired by Revolver, especially this part, if you can see that clearly. But this, Pleasant Valley Sunday, Star Collector and Don't Call on Me and Salesman, but that is an absolutely stellar album. The next one is really where I think things started. They started recording separately. Now, all this stuff was probably, Peter may not have been on this song, or Davey may not have been on that song, but it was still under the production or under the watching eyes of the Monkees. The next one, it was like they were all doing things separately, but still the album is a great one. And that's The Birds, the Bees, and the Monkees. That is the back cover there. And the song Daydream Believer was actually recorded during the sessions for this album, but not released until afterwards. It was held over. And it makes an appearance here. This has some of my other favorite Monkee songs, like Dream World and I'll Be Back Upon My Feet. Valerie is on here. Righting Wrongs is on there. And Tapioca Tundra. And lots of great stuff. I do actually own the Super Deluxe Edition, which contains many, many, many bonus tracks. As you can see, it goes from that to that. I don't want to call it a psychedelic album because it's a crazy potpourri of psychedelia, pure pop, folk, and it really had a strange effect on me because I remember distinctly feeling it was different than all the other albums, but really not knowing why. And I think later on that's when I learned that Davy's tracks were recorded separately of Mickey's, were recorded separately of Peter's, etc. But it still works as a cohesive album. It wasn't going to work as successfully in the future, but at that moment it was. Then came, of course, the movie Head, which is a fantastically weird, outrageous movie. Here is Head, and originally it came out, it was like a mirrored cover. I don't know if anyone really noticed it, but that sort of looks like the back of the Revolver album. But anyway, this is the soundtrack. Weird, crazy. This is more eclectic than anything that they put out before. And not as cohesive, but it's still, if you see the movie and experience the album with the knowledge of each other, I think it works a lot better. I mean, Circle Sky and the Porpoise song has become one of the Monkees' most famous songs. But there is Head. And after that album and movie and the 33 1/3 revolutions per monkey TV special, Peter went bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. True Monkees fans will get that reference. Then came Instant Replay. Instant Replay is, again, a collection of tracks recorded at separate sessions. Like, in fact, Teardrop City sounds like any other Boys and Heart song. In fact, it sounds a lot like Last Train to Clarksville, and they sped it up from the original 1966 recording. So this is more sort of thrown together collection of songs. Again, not cohesive, but still a wonderful listen. Because even though Davy wasn't really a musician and Mickey was an actor before the Monkees, they still had wonderful ideas, wonderful musical ideas, and they were able to get other people to help them realize those musical ideas. And while Instant Replay is not a glorious album, it is still a worthwhile addition to your collection. In fact, it took me years to finally say, I'm going to get Instant Replay, because I didn't like a couple songs, but once I did add it to my collection, it just melted my heart. So much so that I do have the Super Deluxe Edition right there. This edition turns one single LP into all that wonderful music. There's like some other things that come in these boxes as well, like a 7-inch single and a badge, and they're really nicely put together. So if you find these online, if you find these in a store, definitely check them out. Maybe even try Rhino.com. They might have some of them still in stock. And then coming up next was the Monkees present yet another strange conglomerate of weirdness and fun. This album has Mommy and Daddy. It has Listen to the Band. It's pretty much along the same lines as Instant Replay, but this one, from what I understand, was actually supposed to be a 2-record album, and they pared it down to 1. There is the track listing there. Again, the boys in the band working separately, but combining music or their studio recordings onto one release. Interesting thing is by this time, Mike Nesmith had been writing great songs for the Monkees already, but by this time, he was just blossoming as a songwriter. In fact, a lot of the Monkees recordings that came out on box sets and such were unreleased Mike Nesmith recordings that maybe he re-recorded later with a First National Band, but he was writing some amazing tracks. If they had put Mike in charge of the recording sessions and let him choose which songs Mickey was going to sing and which songs he and Davey were going to sing, I think that the Monkees could have lasted a lot longer. Unfortunately, the record company was having issues with it. And speaking of which, I do have the deluxe of that one as well. And there's all those bonus tracks. And finally, let's talk about Mike leaving. And that leaving two Monkees, Mickey and Davey. Album called Changes. Again, not consistent. Great songs on there, but you have to dig a little deep. And think about the first Monkees, first 4 or 5 Monkees albums. First listen, you're going, oh, I love that song. Oh, I love that song. Oh, that song's okay. But you're getting hit with more songs that you love on first listen. Albums like The Monkees Present or Instant Replay, Changes. These are albums that you really have to listen to quite a few times in order to let the song sink in. Sometimes it may not have been worth it to sit through, but every Monkees album to me is worthwhile and should really be embraced, or go back and re-listen. If you didn't like The Monkees Present, or if you didn't like The Birds and the Bees and the Monkees, go back and give them a solid listen because they are very strong collections of songs. Up through Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones, they were great albums. Then after that, they were great collections of songs. But that is actually it. The Monkees split up. They obviously went off and did various things, and they've reunited. Two things that I want to bring up here before I close this video. And I'm sorry I'm not going to talk about Pool It or Justus or Good Times because we all know and love those albums anyway. But I just want to talk about this period of the Monkees. This box set here, the Monkees 50, 10 CD box set, features the 9 albums that I've talked about, plus this collection, which is only in the box, and it contains rarities that you can't find anywhere else. Like, everybody knows that Daydream Believer 1985 remix with new drums is on this collection. So are the other new recordings from that set, and some real rarities there. So definitely, if you can track this down, I highly recommend it. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to mention one more release because a lot of people really don't know about it. Not a big fan of the CD reissue cover, but it is the Dolenz Jones Boyce and Hart album. Of course, Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones from the Monkees, Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart were the songwriters who wrote some of their earlier hits, and I love this album. I mean, a lot of it apes the Monkees. I mean, at this time they were touring an oldies act, a nostalgia act, and but when they went into the studio, they recorded all new material. Some of the songs are definitely sort of like You Didn't Feel That Way Last Night, Don't You Remember is a rewrite of Stepping Stone. But there's some great songs on here, and I highly recommend you, at least if it's on Spotify or on YouTube, definitely track it down. But I would say go buy a copy. If you're a Monkees fan, this is definitely worth your time. Dolenz Jones Boyce and Hart. And the reason that I'm including this is because this came out roughly 10 years after the first Monkees album did. And this closes out like a 10-year period. And that is it for my little travel through the Monkees back catalog on CD. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching. And my name is SPAZ, and I'm a CD junkie.